If President Putin decided to go to war with Britain, we'd most likely lose. Yeah. That's according to the head of the British Army, General Sir Nick Carter. As a result, General Carter is demanding we spend more money on defence. But is an all-out war between just Britain and Russia in any way likely? No, of course not. Being part of NATO means it couldn't happen. If we were attacked by Russia, all our NATO partners are committed to support us, so Russia wouldn't take the risk. Why would we want to spend more public money on our conventional army when we're already the fifth highest spender on armaments in the world, and at a time when vital public services like our struggling NHS need more cash? If there is a threat from Russia, it is more likely to be a range of cyber attacks. And I agree with General Carter that that threat might require greater investment. But our conventional army does not need more cash.
Well, call me crazy, but when it comes to running an army, I'm probably going to listen more to a general than I am to you, Greg Dyke, for various reasons. But if I was to say to you that in the last few years, if I'd told you many years ago, the last few years, Russia would effectively invade Ukraine, they'd shoot an airliner out of the sky. In Britain, we'd have to deploy troops because a terrorist had decided to blow up a concert hall in Manchester where little girls were listening to a band. You think, my God, what sort of world are we in there? And with those sort of constant threats, the idea, and it all has to be rationalised as to how much extra money. But if you've got a general, because what annoys me is that normally it's when they retire that they say the army is on the verge of collapsing, Navy hasn't got enough ships, it's terrible retreat. And it takes a brave general while you're in post, as he is. If he's saying, I think we should listen, I'm not automatically signing the chequebook, but he must have a valid argument.
But you see, well,
the world is a changing place,
To be fair to him, let's have a look at what he said.
OK.
The main impact has been to convince ordinary Russians that the West is a threat. We've been made to appear as the enemy, whether we like it or not, and whatever the real situation. Moreover, we, on our side, don't have the same level of understanding.
I mean, everybody who's head of the Defence Forces, like anyone who's head of the NHS, like anyone who's head of our school systems, they all say we need more money. Now, you're the one who says week after week we can't increase taxation. Well, if we're not going to increase taxation, if there is any more money available, it's not a lot, and at the moment you'd spend it on the health service. You wouldn't spend on
well, the first priority is defence of the nation, defence of the... I would suggest it's a changing world,
yes,
Greg.
But I'm saying that it's not under threat. I mean, if we are under threat from cyber attack and the rest of it,
yes.
would you give it to the army to spend? No.
No.
Sorry, no, carry on.
I just think I'm in the middle here between you two, and I think I am literally.
Yes, you are. Right. They worked it out.
I agree with you. We wouldn't have predicted Russia's aggressive stances in the Crimea, in Syria and what it's doing there, and increasingly, extending its foreign policy across the world, backing Iran, for example, and what the mischief Iran's been up to in the Middle East. We wouldn't have predicted all of that. Of course, don't forget, Greg, we did have an agreement with the Ukraine that if the Crimea was annexed by the Russians, we'd jump to their defence, and we didn't honour that agreement. So, people, I think it's understandable that they may suspect whether the NATO powers are up to the job, especially with Turkey and some of its machinations these days inside Syria. Would we leap to Turkey's defence if Erdogan the nutter decided to do something to the Kurds and it was wrong? So there are genuine questions, but at the same time, I agree with you. I think that we've got to be smart about it. I think the threat today isn't, and it's highly unlikely that Russia would invade Britain. Yeah. There would be no land invasion. I think the threat is cyber. I think it is online. I think it's things like hacking and what have you, and leaking information and spies, and even perhaps taking out certain operatives through poison and assassination, as the Russians did on British soil with Litvinenko. Yeah. So I think we need to be smart about how we spend the money. So not necessarily buying more tanks, but looking at cyber, which may not be the army, but also looking at drones for intelligence gathering, not for bombing people.
Real quick intervention, just so that the viewers get an idea. Let's just take a look at some of the spending and some of the numbers of troops we're talking about. I'll just pick one number out from the top. The GDP on defence, for instance, Russia, 5.3%, UK, I would argue, just 2%. That gives you an idea, and there's some troop numbers there as well.
The Russian
but isn't that our requirement?
5.3.
The requirement under NATO is 2%.
Yes.
Yeah. We're spending that.
Yes.
I mean, good point. The only point that worried me about the whole thing was, I mean, when you do get a President Trump who gets elected really criticising NATO and saying it wasn't necessary. Now, I suspect because he didn't know what NATO was, he very rapidly changed his position. He very rapidly changed his position.
And just to add to that, well, number one, the Russian economy isn't as large as ours, so if they're spending 5%, we're spending 2%, I bet you we're still spending more than they are. But the other part is this, I think what Russia has shown us is in terms of how they plan on attacking the West, it is through cyber. If you look at what they did with the US elections, I don't see why they wouldn't do that here. There's possibility that they were involved in Brexit. So who knows? So for me, I think the focus should be on spending on cyber, for sure. They've proven that's what they're going to do.
Well, I'm personally in shock because this is the first episode of The Pledge I've done with you where you are not calling for us to pay more tax. So that is my first point.
I'll be doing that later.
Slightly confused, but now, putting that aside, I agree with you because I think in terms of military might, when you look at the numbers of NATO combined versus Russia, NATO way outdoes Russia in terms of tanks, military personnel and everything. So I don't think we need to boost that side of it. But to your point, I think you're absolutely right that we need to be thinking about how are we going to combat the cyber, the propaganda, the fake news, the influencing of elections, apparently, and all that kind of thing. And we can only do that with training and investment in our cyber security forces. You're right.
And, of course, we are planning to spend £31 billion, I think it is, on Trident, which I think a lot of people in the armed forces are not certain is the right way to spend your money. And that would release a lot of money to spend on other... But I still wouldn't spend it on...
But would you get rid of Trident?
No, I would spend it on cyber. Would I get rid of Trident? It's a very difficult... I was very interested watching the interview with Tony Blair recently, who said when he was Prime Minister, they looked quite carefully at saying, do we really want Trident? Now, Blair was not a hard-line lefty by anybody's standards, you know. So, and what he was saying was we could have just come under the American umbrella under Trident, and therefore we would have saved this sort of money. And I think that's an interesting discussion to have.
Yeah.
So that means
what cost does that come?
I'm not certain.
Yeah, here's the thing. Often lefties in the UK are very critical of America, and yet when it comes to Trident, are happy for us to be beholden to American influence. And I think we've got to be careful here because...
I think you're confusing Tony Blair.
Hold on. Well, no, I'm talking about the narrative that is shot. So I think we've got to be very careful here that what does America under Trump demand from us? If we cut down on our 2% commitment, and cutting Trident would significantly cut that because it's quite expensive, what would Trump demand of us? Apart from the posturing, he'd be quite angry. But what would he demand of us? And how would he try and humiliate us by saying, oh, Britain has become one of our satellite nations, reliant on us for its defence? I think we've got to be...
I think if we decide all policy based on Trump, we're in real
If
trouble.
we're saying whether you're I'm saying whether you're a Brexiteer who wants Britain to carve its own way out in the world, or you're a left-winger who doesn't want us to be under the domain of Trump's influence in America. My point is, whatever your narrative is, it doesn't make sense either way then, does it, surely? Surely we have to maintain our independence, whether you're a Brexiteer or
Well, there seem to be an awful lot of
Yeah.
countries around the world who don't have their equivalent of Trident, who are independent. That's what I'm saying. But I'm not...
This is Great Britain.
Yeah, that's the problem. That's the problem. This is the old imperial power. We ruled the world and we can still rule the world. That I think, is the wrong attitude. I'm not certain about Trident. I really am not.
Coming back to your point, June, though, about the spending as regards the military personnel, and Michelle is absolutely right to bring in NATO. I say just challenge the same, I think, said to Greg. The world moves at a dizzying pace, you know.
Okay.
We just have no idea what might be waiting around the corner.
Precisely, that's why I'm saying let's spend the money on technology. Let's spend the money where the world is moving. The world is moving based on technology.
That's a very accurate point. The way they acted in Crimea or Ukraine, they could be doing that again, and we just got people looking at computers.
But there's no way they would come and do that here.
No.
They're far too sophisticated
but NATO was completely
operate in that way.
I mean, the Russians must be laughing all the way to the Kremlin.
That is not how the Russians would attack the West.
I suspect Erdogan's
they do
going to ruin
that in
NATO
Crimea,
for us,
not
by the
here.
way. Erdogan's behaviour, because of what he's doing in Syria against the Kurds, I think that NATO was never meant to be an offensive pact. It was a defensive pact. Erdogan's on the offensive, and if he comes under attack now because of his movements in Syria, do we have to leave to his defence? It's dangerous.